Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. This is going to be a very difficult topic for some people, and I'm going to start it off by saying something very controversial. Should Paladin even be a class in Dungeons and Dragons? Wow, all the Paladin players are probably throwing things at me right now. I do apologise, but let me have an opportunity to defend this view and explain whether I actually agree with it or not, because both sides have got some very compelling arguments. In the case for Dungeons and Dragons having Paladins as a player class, Paladin has been an option since the very first edition of Dungeons and Dragons 50 or so years ago. So Paladin has a legacy. It's worth keeping around for that alone. Paladin has a very specific class fantasy as well. The noble knight in shining armour, the heroic, virtuous character, the exemplar of everything that is righteous and holy. It's a strong class ideal, and that's really important. When building a class in Dungeons and Dragons, this idea of class fantasy, how do people want to play this class? That's really important. In terms of battlefield role or role within the party, the Paladin is a bit of a mixed bag, a jack of all trades or jack of many trades. As a charisma-based character, they make excellent party faces. In melee, they are a tanky character that can still dish out a lot of damage, a lot of nova damage through the use of smites. They have some spells, not many, but as a half-caster, they do have spells and spell slots, so they have some magical utility, though again, most of this is focused on combat. They have some great special spells like Find Steed and Find Greater Steed, so if you have this heroic character riding some sort of monster into battle, that's definitely your Paladin. And then there are the Paladin special abilities. I've already mentioned smites through the nova damage, but they've also got lay on hands, and they have a very powerful aura which boosts the defenses of all nearby allies. So in terms of gameplay, Paladin is a very special and useful character to have in the party. I think that is enough reason to say that Paladins should stay in the game forever. But here's the problem. What differentiates Paladins from a battle cleric, a heavily armed, god-based warrior with magic who wades into battle as a frontline fighter? What separates Paladin from a fighter that has a subclass with some faith-based and magic-based special abilities? As a character who has made a deal with a powerful being in the form of their oath, what separates Paladin from a Hexblade Pact of the Blade Warlock who has made a pact with a powerful otherworldly creature for abilities in combat and is charisma based? In terms of mechanics, there is a lot of overlap between Paladin and three other classes: a fighting-based cleric, a magic and holy-based fighter, and a specifically spec'd up warlock. I think that level of overlap is somewhat of a problem. You can make a very good Paladin without ever being a Paladin. So, what do we do about Paladins? Do we either get rid of them and give cleric, fighter, and warlock Paladin-like options to replicate it? Or do we make the Paladin more different than what it is from those three classes? And I have to say, I strongly favour the latter one. I don't think reducing Paladin to a multi-class or a subclass is a fair deal. Bearing in mind, that's what it used to be in the past. A paladin was a prestige class. I don't think that's the future for Dungeons and Dragons. That's not the future that I would make for Dungeons and Dragons. I would keep paladins around as their own class, but I would definitely want to tweak it to make it more distinct so that people wouldn't look at it and go, oh, that's just a cleric, a war domain cleric, or a holy fighter, or a Pact of the Blade Warlock that's chosen a god to make a pact with. How I would do that, that requires some more thought. I do have thoughts on the Paladin though. Firstly, I mentioned this in my previous video, I would make 2 subclasses for Paladin. There would be the nature of your oath and who your oath is with. So an Oath of Conquest Paladin of Tyr has 2 subclasses built into it, and you get some of your subclasses by being devoted to Tyr, and you get some of your subclasses, subclass abilities by being Oath of Conquest. And this would create a nice matrix. If you include 3 or 4 subclasses in your basic book and 3 or 4 gods in your basic book, that's already 16 combinations. And every time you add one new cleric, one new god for clerics and paladins to follow, and one new oath for paladins to make, you are now adding many different combinations for players to choose from. Secondly, should paladins be charisma based for their magical abilities? I don't think they should, given that we already have Warlock and Bard and Sorcerer as charisma casters. I think there's too much overlap there. And I would be tempted to make them wisdom casters. Yes, I know we have clerics and druids already, but I think the strength of will of a paladin is more a defining feature than their ability to sweet talk people. What I would say for paladins is that they should, when appropriate to their oath or god, be allowed to use wisdom instead of charisma. If you're trying to persuade someone that your cause is noble, you would not use your charisma, you would use your wisdom, because that represents your faith and your strength of will. So I would tie paladins down to wisdom and give them the ability to use wisdom instead of charisma when the DM agrees that it's appropriate. I actually like this as a general idea, that players should be able to use other ability scores when appropriate for skills. Is performance always a charisma-based skill? What if you're dancing? Should it be dexterity? Is intimidation always charisma-based? If you're threatening someone, maybe strength would be more appropriate. And when clerics and paladins are trying to convince people of the righteousness of their cause, their faith, their strength of will, their wisdom is perhaps a better target to go off than charisma. How else would I change paladins? Looking through the paladin ability list, the main abilities that people tend to use are the smite, which I think that's good. That's a paladin-based one, using the strength of your conviction from your oath to cool down the power from your patron. That sounds warlock. From your divine buddy. That also sounds warlock. Whatever. Using your strength of your conviction to smite your enemy. That's a good paladin ability. Maybe some clerics should get that too, but that's a different discussion. Lay on hands. That's a very cleric-based ability. Detect good and evil. That's a very cleric-sounding ability. And the paladin's aura is perhaps also a cleric-sounding ability. I think clerics and paladins need to be somewhat separated out. I think there's a lot of abilities that sound and feel very cleric-y that have been rolled into the paladin, and we need to split these apart. Now, having a paladin lead by example and give some sort of buff to their companions and allies nearby, I think is perfect for the class fantasy. And at the moment, that manifests itself as a boost to saving throws. It's a very defensive ability, whereas I think paladins should be more about rousing a rabble, bringing passion and fury to people's hearts, and through the strength of their conviction, leading them into battle. It sounds like a more offensive option to me, and this would synergize well with them having smites as an offensive opportunity. The detect good and evil, that's a very cleric-y thing. Maybe there should be some protection from good and evil from the paladin. The strength of their conviction, the power of their oath offers them some protection. That's worth thinking about. And the lay on hands thing, that's a very cleric thing to do. I would perhaps change that to something else. What? I don't know yet. I haven't put a huge amount of thought into this. But as I was going to sleep last night, I was running through my head, like, what makes paladins special? What makes paladins different? Do paladins even deserve to be? And my conclusion is yes, paladins definitely deserve a place on the table. They are one of the core classes. They have their own unique class fantasy. But I think through good game design, we should change how they work. And that's actually a really important thing for game designers to think about. Does character idea and character class and class fantasy lead the game design and the gameplay? Or does it work the other way around? I feel that in some subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons and classes in other games as well, the rules that class has been given drive how that class is played, rather than the other way around, which is the class fantasy driving the rules. So if your paladin is a holy warrior chosen by one of the gods, and they've made a commitment through their oath, then this concept should be leading the abilities that class gets. If you give a class a set of abilities that are a buff to allies' saving throws, smite and heavy armor, that's going to drive how they're being played. And I don't think it quite lines up. I think we can make it better, and I think paladins should stick in the rulebook. I just think it needs some tweaking. So this is two big questions to deal with, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Do paladins deserve to be their own class? I have put forward both arguments, and I think yes. I'd love to hear why you agree with me, or perhaps why you don't agree with me. And secondly, considering the class fantasy, what abilities should a paladin have? I'd love to hear what your idea of the class fantasy of a paladin is, and how that should manifest itself through rules and through gameplay. So I'd love to hear your ideas on this, and as always, enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.